it, nurture it, build it, help develop it, cause people to thrive in their lives and in what God's called them to do so that they fulfill the plans and purposes that he has for them in their lives. And if we're able to really, our mindsets moving on to how are we growing, like the conversation that came out just at the end between Rachel and Fiona and some of the other comments that were made, it just really excited me, because this is kind of exactly why we're doing today, to enable us to kind of be looking like how are we growing and how are we going to develop stuff through and improve it and take it even further. So I'm encouraged already, and I know this is great material. So I'm going to hand back to Pastor Claire and take it from there.
Great. Good. I'm glad it's getting you all thinking. That's why we love this course. It is of all the courses, this is our favourite course, because it doesn't matter what size your church is or where you are at in your journey with church, how old your church is. This is really good because it helps you look at what you're doing. It's that audit, as Alan was talking about. So we're going to come back to some more discussion in a little while, but we're going to keep going on with the training. We're going to do the 17, which is the last one that you've got there, evaluating your church's ministry. So, a wise farmer continually evaluates. It's one of the 5 E's from the church building system as well. It's the last one. Evaluate and adjusts gardening methods for the greatest possible harvest. And that's what we want, isn't it? Everywhere we go, people are praying for this greater harvest. And I think in the UK, more than anywhere else that we go at the moment, everybody is talking about how easy it is to see people saved, that they're seeing people walk in off the street, just into church randomly. And it's just, seems to be much more of an openness, and there is a move of the Spirit going on across this land. And that's why Alan and I feel this burden to encourage people to plant churches. And we have a line that we say to everybody, a question we ask is, what would you need to do if your church doubled overnight? What would you need to do to be ready for all those fish that the Lord is bringing in and that you are praying for? And we see so many people are praying for the harvest. We're praying for more souls. You know, in Manchester, we're praying for 1 million salvations. And after one of the prayer meetings that we went to in the city in January, I walked out of that meeting and I was walking through Piccadilly Gardens. And I turned to Alan and I said, that means that 1 in 3 people that we're looking at now, we are believing is going to be walking with Jesus. That's a huge faith goal. It's a huge faith goal. But that means there are not enough churches. There's not enough nets. And even if this church grew to 1,000, which is what we're praying for, isn't it? Double services, triple services. See, if we're praying for these things, it can be very romantic to go, let's be 1,000 people, but so there are other things that have to happen. There are things that have to be in place, because we have to be ready, otherwise there won't be room for all these people that we're praying for. So the wise farmer continually evaluates and adjusts his garden methods for the greatest harvest. So here, everything that we've done up to now is great for the size that we are, but now we need to adjust. Because if we are believing for more, and, you know, thank you for sharing about Mount Chapel and the size you are, but what you're believing for, because you're believing to double. So again, it's that same thing of what do you need to adjust. And Matthew 7:17-20 says, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. So we're expected to evaluate the fruit we are producing. We need to look at what is working well and what isn't working well, and be prepared to change. You know, at the beginning of, and Alan alluded to it already, at the beginning of my dad's book, The Lord's Orchard, in the first, I think it's the first chapter, he talks about how when we look at a tree that is green and lush and beautiful and amazing, we look at that. But the Lord doesn't look at that. He looks at, is it bearing fruit? And we can have amazing churches that look incredible, that have all these amazing things, but is it bearing fruit? So this is part of the evaluation. So the purpose of this session is to help you lead your church into a continuously improving organism with an ever-increasing harvest. John 15:1-2, I'm the true vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You know, that's hard sometimes. But you know, sometimes there's things and they're bearing little fruit, and we need to actually go, no, it's time to stop that. I remember years and years and years ago when I first started women's ministry in the Scout Hall back in the day, and we filled the Scout Hall. And Alan said to me one morning, he says, Claire, I don't want you to do women's ministry anymore. And I'm like, what? We filled the hall. And he goes, yeah, but that's not what we need to focus on right now. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, we need to focus on growing the church first. Then you can do the women's ministry. And I had to learn right way back then that we had to cut that branch off right then. But it doesn't mean to say that I wasn't going to go on to have the women's ministry, okay? But there are times when the pastor has to make some hard decisions and go, it's not the season for this. Or it is the season for this. And we need to be ready for that new season that is coming. So evaluation is part of good administration. And we see that here, the Joseph principle on the 12 principles, which is attending to organizational and administrative matters, will protect and stabilize the church and enable it to grow in a healthy way. So the first thing, or let me just talk about that for a minute, because that's in a first training. It's one of the examples we use is a rock. You know, if you roll a rock up a hill and you spend a lot of time rolling that rock up the hill, and suddenly you encounter a major issue or a major problem, you've got a choice. Do I deal with that problem, or do I keep holding on to the rock? And most people are going to deal with the problem. And what happens is the rock then rolls down. But if you have systems in place, okay, and as you're rolling up the hill, so as you're growing your church and you have the systems in place, and your leaders know the systems, and your team know the systems, and how your team runs or your group runs, then it's like that stabilizing. So as you're rolling it up, you're putting a system in place. So you put a platform in place. And the rock can rest on that platform while you deal with this. And then you roll up further and there's another platform in place. So you can deal with this. And the platform is the systems, and everybody knows this is how it runs. So when you have an emergency, when the pastor can't be there, or when the team leader can't be there, or when the small group leader isn't there, everybody knows this is how it runs, this is the culture, and it stabilizes and holds everything in place. So we're looking here at how do you evaluate your worship services weekly. So who should evaluate? So every week, and I know some of you will have heard us say this, but we would say to you, if you are the leader of a team, what is one thing that I can do better to make the team I'm part of run better? What is one thing? So at the end of the week, everybody, the leader and the team member is thinking, what's one thing I could do better so that the team I'm part of runs better next week? It's easier to make a little adjustment each week than a huge adjustment in one go. And then the team leader is asking the same question of the team, but they're asking themselves, what's one thing I can do better as the team leader to make this team run better next week? Maybe you realized I didn't communicate properly, or I could have sent out what we're doing a little bit earlier, or I didn't let them know something important was happening, or whatever it is. But you are asking that question each week. So the pastors need to evaluate how Sunday went. The core team, the SL team and the core team need to consider, how did it go this week? The areas that I'm over, how did they go this week? Think about people you're reaching as well. You know, were we effective in reaching people that we're reaching out to? I don't know if you know, but the very first letter that goes out on the welcome process, so when somebody comes to the church here and they sign up their name and they say, yes, they want to know more, and they press that button that says yes, it generates an email that goes out to them. And that email says, we hope you enjoyed worshipping or being with us today. We'd love to know from you what your experience was. And it asks them 2 questions. So right at the very beginning, we're letting new people in the church know that their voice matters. And we want to hear from them. Because actually, remember, who are we here for? We're here for the lost. We're here for those that aren't part of the church. So we want them to know that we value what they say and what their experience has been. And then maybe you could have an expert, somebody come in, and we talked about this, didn't we, when, the other day when we were looking at something else. Having somebody come in and evaluate your church service. So a long time ago, when we had Beth and Jeff Jones here, we asked Jeff Jones to do this, and we right from the road, he walked in as if we hadn't been in for a Sunday service before, and he walked right in, and he made some comments about what he saw. One was about the bins, because we used to have, there wasn't all of this here, and the first thing you could see was the bin. And he said, when I walked into church, that was the first thing I saw, was the bin. And we thought, well, that's interesting. But, it becomes wallpaper to us. But to him, it was like that was the first thing he saw. Then he came in and he said, I didn't know where to sit. And we said, but there were so many chairs that were empty. And he goes, yeah, but there was something on every chair. And do you remember when we used to put the offering envelopes on the chairs? Well, in America, he's American, in America, they have, in the back of every church that I've been to, in the back of the chair, they have a slot and the envelope is in there. So for him, he was going, I didn't know where I could sit. And we also say, most people in this room, I'm sorry, because I know Alan's history, but anyway, most people in this room have probably never walked into a betting shop. If I walked into a betting shop, I would not have a clue what to do. I wouldn't know how to put a bet down. I'd feel out of place. I would feel strange. I would feel uncomfortable. We've got people in Salford who are third generation, unchurched, have never stepped into church before. The weddings they've been to, if there have been weddings, happen in hotels or in other places. They might go to a crematorium when somebody dies, but there is no other reason to walk into a church building. So when they walk in here, they don't know where the toilets are. They don't know how we do things or where to sit, or is that somebody's section or is that my section? So it's thinking about all of those things. So you could ask somebody who's never been to the church before to come and evaluate and say what they find. But you might want to do that with your teams. You might want to ask somebody who's never been on your team to come and evaluate your team. It's quite a brave thing to do, really, because I think sometimes as leaders we think, I've got it together, my team runs really well, But having somebody else remember, humble yourselves. Let somebody else come in and go, why do you do that? Is there a reason? I don't know. So anyway, just think about that. Okay, so evaluate your group ministry quarterly. So which groups are working well and why? So we're talking here mainly about the small groups. But what groups are working well and why? I remember when I was over the life groups, I used to grow groups. I used to go round. So each week I'd go to a different one. And because you're looking, is what they're doing in line with the Bible? Are they still talking about the vision of the church? Is everything in line with what we're doing? Am I happy with this as the pastor leader over this area? And but you also get to see things that you wouldn't see if you don't go. And I remember going to Elizabeth's house, and when you and Charity, where's Charity? When you girls were leading that group in your house, I remember going there and I walked in and I thought, wow, this is a group I want to be part of. You had a presentation playing on the TV that said, welcome to Grow Group this week. You had the vision of the church running. You had some decoration or something that you put up. And I said, do you always have that? And you said, no, we do this when we have the Grow Group. And I thought, first impressions, I haven't even heard a word out of your mouths yet. And as a person who's never walked into your Grow Group, I thought, I belong, And when you get to see that, you need to tell other people what they do, because you're encouraging other people in how they can make their groups welcoming. So it's learning what's working well and why. Why is it working well? Why is that group? Why do all the people want to join that group? What is the leader doing that's making that group attractive? But then equally, it's the groups that aren't working and going, why isn't it working? Is it because of the area it's in? Is it because it's on a time that people can't make? So you're looking at why things aren't working. How well did we do at inviting people to come and join the group? And how can we improve? How active are we with the people in our area or the people that we have know about. And obviously we've talked about size, haven't we, just a little bit earlier on. Should we add more groups? Can we? Who is ready to lead a group? Do we need to do anything more or better about providing childcare for our groups? So again, that goes to the kind of group that you are running. I know that some of the groups that started a bit earlier when they were in person, they would do stuff for children. So again, it's looking at that. And again, all the time it's evaluating, and that's together with the pastors, what you're doing, what you're teaching, what the topics are. And, you know, I don't know if you still do this, but on Church Suite, if you lead a grow group, then you're supposed to do a little report. I don't know if you do that little report still, but you're supposed to do a little report. But that, whoever's over grow groups, that report is really important because it tells you what is happening, who's attending, who's not attending, and it gives you an idea of, you know, what we need to focus on. But also, you're putting things like if somebody's prayed or there's a prayer need, or it's a great communication tool to keep the leaders informed as to what is happening. So then evaluate other programs periodically. So other ministries that you're doing, you know, to me, I put youth and children's ministry. I'm not sure what's written in your notes. I put that down with teams, that you should be evaluating that much more than periodically. But when you do other things like your women's ministry or men's ministry or, you know, mission, certain things that you do once a year, it's taking that time to evaluate it. You can use SWOT. You know, I know we've used that over the years. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But you're listening to everybody involved, so you know from both sides what is working, what isn't working. So, so evaluate each annual or periodic event, and you'll see there's a sample evaluation form. I think you've got that in your notes, have you? Yeah. Just what went well, what went better than expected, what could have gone better, did we accomplish our goal? How do we know we've accomplished our goal? So what we're doing, who are we trying to reach out to? Was it for in church or was it for outside church? All of those kinds of things you need to think about. Should we hold this event again? Remember, sometimes there's going to be times when you say no because it's not borne any fruit or it's not the season for that. No, we're not going to do that this year. We're going to do it every 2 years or something. So it's being prepared to adjust. If we repeat this event, what must we change or add? And again, when will we need to start work on it? Next year. Maybe you got your timings wrong, or timings were ahead or they were behind. So you're thinking all the time and you're evaluating all the time on those big events that you are doing. Then evaluate the overall health, like those above and below, of your church twice a year. So if anybody has done Healthy Church Dynamics, we would suggest that you do a quick run through of your Healthy Church Dynamics and look at the different areas and go, how are these areas working? And, you know, it's part of the vision planning anyway, is to look back over, you know, that 6-month vision planning is to look back over the last 6 months and go, how are we on the goals or what we're doing this year? And then that, as we plan ahead, it's setting what we are going to do the next year. So all the time we're looking ahead, but we're also evaluating. So record lessons you've learned over the past 6 months. You know, what have you learned as you've been leading your team? It's really good to stop and to think about, you know, how everything's going. Maybe list your team members and go, are they growing? Just ask simple questions. Are they growing? How can I help them grow further? You know, if you're the leader, you're a leader for a reason. You've been appointed as a leader because there are skills, giftings that have been recognized in your life. And one of those is that you can then assess those who are part of your team. Who is my assistant, and how am I helping them grow so that they can lead this ministry, or so that we can double this grow group, we multiply and have 2 grow groups? Who is coming in behind them as well? So you're not just going, we're going to add, but you're thinking multiplication all the time. So it's all the time, is the minute you are in a leadership position, who's my assistant? So that assistant raised up, who's my assistant? So all the time you're multiplying and getting ready for growth. So it's evaluating the 8 critical systems that we have run through, that I showed you at the beginning. And, you know, as Mark and Simone have said, Pastors Mark and Simone have said, they're doing this course with us at the moment. And then determine the 2 or 3 areas on which you want to strategically focus on over the next 6 to 12 months. So when you think about your team and everything that you're hearing today, you know, what is the 2 or 3 things you want to focus on or concentrate, you see are the weaknesses? What's the weaknesses in your team? And what are the strengths in your team? What do you need to adjust? What do you need to change? And we're going to come back to this question all the time. If you were to double overnight, what would you need to do? If this church doubled overnight, what would you need to do? Then setting goals and timelines for those areas. So you might walk away from here going, actually, I need an assistant. What's your timeline? Now. Now. Because if this church is growing and multiplying, you need an assistant now. That's your timeline. But for other things that you go, actually, I need to focus on this, when do you want to see that in place? And I just want to bring you right back to the vision board training that I know Pastor Simone did with everybody last year. And just the vision board, it's putting your faith goals, really. It's putting your faith goals up for you to see and that everybody can see. So if your faith goal is to double in size, then in your office or in where your people who are serving or your leadership team, they've got something they can look at that says, we are believing for Mount Chapel to double in size by, and give it a by this year or by this time next year. Because when we see vision, when we see it in front of us, you know, it helps us to focus all the time. What we see, you know, in our gateways, what we hear and what we see is so crucial. And so having those goals in front of us all the time really helps us focus. Again, think through your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You know, when you think about threats, these are things that jeopardize the health of your church or the health of your team or the health of your group. So what is jeopardizing it? What could actually cause your team to suddenly not work? So if you're the team leader and you are the only person who knows how to do one specific thing, all it takes is for you not to come to church one Sunday and nobody else knows how to do that. So in every team, you need to have at least 2 people that know how to do every task so that you've always got a backup. That might not be your assistant, that could be somebody else in your team, but that's how you that's having a strong team. So then we're coming on to, actually, let me just go back here a second. So So in there, in your handbook, in that handbook, have you got that sample team, I'm going to call it, retreat agenda? Yeah, so this is, yeah, so this can be done at different levels. So Pastors Mark and Simone can do this with the SL team. They can do this with the core team. But have you thought about having, if you're a team leader over a team, have you thought about setting a Saturday morning aside with your team where you can just spend 2 to 3 hours praying and evaluating what is working? That there is something called a 360-degree review that is used in the workplace, and that's when you hear from every different layer of people. And that's what we almost want to do with our team, is it's not just how you think your team is running. How does your team think it's running? How does your assistant think it's running? And it's being that, how does God think it's running? But it's being big enough to sit and listen to hear other people's perspective on how they are finding it, and how, and also we have a church here that's multi-generational too. So on our teams, you can have somebody who's retired, but you can have somebody who is a teenager, and everyone in between. And each one, you need to listen, because how are they finding it? And what ideas have they got for today, for adjusting? Society's changing all the time, but it's how are we meeting people? If you think about communication, my favorite form of communication is to talk to somebody, but I find that more and more people just want to text. They just want to text. And when I say, did you speak to somebody? They say, oh, yes, I spoke to them. And I have to go, no, let me just make that clearer. Did you speak with your voice to that person? Or did you speak with a text? And most of the time, it's with a text. And so communication has changed, and we have to work out how to navigate that in this world as a team, so that the teams run and work really well together. So I think we're going now into, just take a few minutes now, and we've got these questions. So the first question, which is not on here, it's the question we ask all the time. If your church doubled in size overnight, what would you need to do in your team or in your grow group, depending on what you're over? Focus on team first, and then if you oversee a grow group and not part of leadership of a team, then focus on the grow group. And then think, so how am I currently evaluating the team that I'm on and how the team is functioning? Okay, so just give you a little bit of time to focus on this. But let me just say, the reason we ask, what would you need to do if your team doubles, if the church doubles overnight? I want to remind you about what we did with the welcome process. First half of the year, we had 20-something, 26 or something, new people coming to the church. I could tell Alan the names of some of them, but I didn't know if they were interested in joining the church or not. And, I knew a little bit about them, but I didn't know everything about them. When we introduced the welcome process, nothing changed, except we had over 40 new people come into the church in that second half of the year. To me, it's almost like God said, okay, now you're ready for new people. I'm going to give you new people. So the reason we're saying, what would you do if your church if we're to double overnight, is what are you doing to be ready? Because the Lord's looking for you to be ready so that he can bring those people. Does that make sense? So that's why we ask this question. So first question, think about your team. What would you need to do? Evaluate now. Evaluate what you would need to do if this church doubled overnight or your church doubled overnight. And think about how are you currently evaluating and what you might need to change. Okay? How many minutes? Give them 10 minutes to begin with.
Because if you assess the issue, then you can make some ideas and plans. You can share solutions. And when you've got a bunch of solutions, you can evaluate what might work from that and then make a plan.
Have you paused that?
The first thing that comes to mind is like availability. Like if we're gonna get more staff, we need to know and coordinate what when they're available, what time they can work around, stuff like that. We're gonna also need to recruit more staff as well. More from outside, to keep new guests coming in, organizing that. But yeah, that's what we can kind of like think.
But even something simple, if the church doubles in size, does that make the children do something? When the children triple or group, as if we've got two adults working at church, or two kids, four kids. How many kids is that? You just don't know, do you?
Well, I think part of the answer to this is around creating a culture that is not linear thinking, but is the multiplication
because we used to have the once a year the grow group training for that we'd have the leaders and the assistants on, and then we'd think about what we needed to multiply.
What you're saying there.
That's
I agree with what you're saying, but I disagree. We created a system that maintains because nobody actively goes out to grow their group.
No, but that's what it was supposed to be.
yeah.
Because we apportion where people go to groups.
No, we told people back then that they could bring people
No,
to the group.
no, but if you go back
They
to
were to
when
do
we
it.
were Kingdom of Faith, Manchester, we had that fourth thing of
Okay.
owning your area,
Yeah.
which we don't have in
Long
GoChurch.
time we haven't had that
No,
here.
exactly.
So my point is, it's not a criticism of what we
No, 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 no.
It's an
It's good,
evaluation
but it's good
to go,
because it's how you see things
but also
differently.
how do we get another 20 grow, another 10 grow groups needs another 20 leaders, 10
Exactly.
group leaders and 10 assistants. But actually, the way we look at that at the moment, I think in most people's mindsets is they go, we need to find 10 or 20 more leaders instead of doing what we're taught, which has been in place, which should have been in place, because this was definitely the model that was being talked about, is that we're identifying who is my assistant to raise them up to lead it. It's not my assistant to cover me when I'm on holiday.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
the difference.
isn't
That's
it?
the difference.
Which is where I think
Yeah.
which is nothing wrong in having an assistant who can
No.
cover me when I'm on holiday.
It's all right, I think like that.
But you're right. But to me that shows how quickly we settle into things.
Yeah.
Because the intention was always growth.
Yeah.
But you're right, the mindset was, if I'm not there, I've got somebody to cover it, and if they're not there, the pastor will cover it.
Yeah. And it just
Instead of